Okay, great. Well, thank you for having me today. I'm excited to talk to the group about one course at a time and other alternatives to traditional college calendars. The purpose of my presentation today is to introduce you to a variety of college calendars that are available, potential advantages to those calendars. I'm not trying to sell you on a particular school, but just trying to broaden your horizons. I want you to think about your college search in a different way, maybe one that you haven't thought about before, and ultimately find a college that's a good fit for you. Just to introduce myself, my name is Marie Schofer. I'm the Associate Director of Admission at Cornell College, and I specifically work with international students. I've worked at Cornell now for 14 years, and it's been a great place to work. So I do like talking about Cornell, and I will touch on Cornell's block plan today and talk a little bit about those advantages. But I want to first talk about some questions that I'd like you to ask yourself. With thinking about the college search, a lot of times people will ask you, well, would you like to go to a small school or a big school or in a certain country, or questions like that. That are perfectly fine questions. Those are good things to think about. But I'd like to challenge you to think about these three questions on the screen today. How do you want your college experience to be the same or different from your high school experience? What type of classroom setting do you enjoy the most? And what single academic experience have you enjoyed most in high school? And I hope that these questions can start to help you think about what kind of college environment you want to be in. Not every college is the same. There are many different varieties, and I'll talk a little bit about some of those today. So first of all, when I talk about the traditional college calendar, I'm referring to a semester-based calendar. This is the most common type of calendar you will see among colleges. And what it means is you'll take 4 or 5 classes in the fall semester simultaneously, and then 4 or 5 classes in the spring semester. If you look at the visual on my screen, this is just kind of an example of what that would look like. So let's talk about some non-traditional calendar options. The first one that I'm going to talk about is a semester calendar that adds on a January or a May term, some type of additional term. There are trimester calendars. There's what I'm calling a modified block calendar. And then the last one I'll talk about is kind of what I would consider to be the most pure example of a block calendar, the one course at a time that Cornell College uses. So again, a visual, hopefully this, excuse me, hopefully this is helpful in just visualizing what it looks like. But if you're at a semester-based calendar school and you're taking 4 classes in the fall and then you have a January term, that one course would fall during the month of January, and then you would continue on with a spring semester where you're taking another 4 or 5 classes simultaneously. There are a lot of different names that schools will use to describe this, sometimes January term, sometimes J term, and I'll talk a little bit about those in a moment. But then there's also the May term option, which is very similar. It's just moving that extra 1-month class to the end of the academic year. And again, lots of different ways to describe it. May term, Maymester, spring term. I mean, there's lots of different ways that schools will use to describe that. But what this means is that you'll have your normal semester calendar, and then you'll have 1 or 2 of these shorter calendar options. Some of these, like January term or May terms, are just 2 weeks long. Sometimes they can be up to 6 weeks long. They may be optional, something you can add onto your college experience, or maybe it's part of a required college experience. At some institutions, a January or a May term may have an additional charge, so you'll want to keep that in mind, especially if finances are something that's very important in your college search. So what would be the advantages of using a term like this, or a calendar like this? Well, I kind of like to say that it's the best of both worlds. You're experiencing that traditional semester calendar, but you're also getting an opportunity to take a class where you'll get to focus more intently on a single subject. During those May term or J term classes, you're likely to build even closer relationships with faculty and other students because you'll be focusing on a single class all at the same time with no other distractions. So you'll have this really fantastic class experience. Those classes are probably more likely to be discussion-based and hands-on. They might include research, internships, they might include field trips, or even extended travel. And there are quite a few schools that operate on these types of calendars, and I divided them up geographically here in the States. But this is just some examples. There are probably far more colleges than are on this list that do either a January term or a May term. And as I mentioned, they'll call these terms different things. For example, at Centre College in Kentucky, they call it Center Term. At Johns Hopkins University in Maryland, they call it Intersession. That takes place in January. At Birmingham College in Alabama, they call it Exploration Term, or they also shorten it to E-term. At MIT, it's called an Independent Activities Period in January, and it's optional. And students can decide if they want to do an additional research project during that time. So again, lots of varieties. Make sure you do your homework to see exactly what your schools that you're looking at offer in this area. Okay, the next calendar that I wanted to talk about is called the Trimester Calendar. And a typical trimester calendar is 3 semesters, and these are 10 weeks long each. So students would take 3 courses each trimester. And you can see on the screen visually what that would look like during the course of the year. What are the advantages? Well, you only have to take 3 classes at a time. Instead of juggling 4 or 5 classes at the same time, you only have 3. With each of these calendars that I describe, you're not necessarily going to be doing less homework. You're just going to be managing homework in fewer classes. So that's one thing I wanted to note here, is that you're probably going to have the same workload as your peers at any college, but your assignments will just be not spread out over so many different subjects. So with only 3 classes, you're just going to be juggling fewer assignments and fewer tests all at the same time. One other advantage that some students really like, I know my husband really liked this at the trimester school that he attended, was that you do get a 6-week holiday break between the Thanksgiving holiday and the New Year. And I know a lot of students like that for the opportunity to just see family, relax, travel, perhaps get a job, or even doing an internship during that time period. Okay, so then a few examples in the East and the Midwest and out West. The next calendar I want to describe is a modified block. And this one I had a lot of trouble trying to come up with a graphic to adequately explain it. And so you'll have to think about these in your head. But at Spalding University in Kentucky, students can choose 1 or 2 classes for each term, and they offer 7 6-week terms throughout the year. 5 of those are during the academic year, and 2 are during the summer. So students can really strategize. If they're going to be taking organic chemistry, they might make that a session where they only take 1 class. But if they're wanting to take some other classes that they feel more comfortable with, that they feel might have not have the same workload as something that is notoriously known for a heavy workload like organic chemistry, they may choose to take 2 classes during a session. If the student is a student athlete or a theater student who knows they're going to be in a big production, during those time periods, they might choose to only take a one class during a session instead of 2. So, this is a way that students can kind of be creative and balance their education along with co-curricular activities. The students also get a 1-week break in between sessions. And this is also something that can be really beneficial when you're studying in college, because the pace is fast and there's a lot of work, and having a mental break in between can sometimes be a really healthy thing to make sure that you're ready and energized to start with that next class. Hastings College in Nebraska recently changed over to one of these modified block calendars, but theirs is slightly different. They will do 2 classes during a 7-week session, one class for 2 weeks, and then another 2 classes for 7 weeks. And that is one semester only. So then they duplicate that in the spring semester. One thing I will say about both of these models at both Spalding and Hastings College is that, yes, they can be kind of complicated to think about, but don't let that scare you away from a college. Just because maybe you're not able to fully understand how a college can utilize this, dig a little deeper, because I can see a lot of potential advantages to this now, especially having been a college graduate and having gone through, in my case, a semester-based calendar. I know the pros and cons of that calendar, and I feel like I would almost be better equipped now to make a decision about what kind of calendar I would like the best now that I've had that experience. And again, that goes back to those original questions that I asked you about what you want your college experience to look like in comparison to your high school experience. So a few other examples I'd like to highlight for this modified, or a few other advantages I'd like to highlight for this modified block calendar is that you have fewer exams to take at the conclusion of each session. You're never going to have a final exams week where you have to take 5 exams at the same time. You can focus your attention on fewer classes. You have the opportunity to rearrange those classes to best suit co-curricular activities and things that are going on in your life. And you also have the opportunity to recharge during those 1-week breaks in between the sessions. Another thing that I will highlight here with this particular calendar is you also have flexible class registration. This is something true at Cornell College as well, in that if you decide to enroll in a college and let's say you pick a psychology major, but part of the way through the semester you realize, I really am not liking this like I thought I would. I'd like to change to an English major or an history major. You can make those changes rather easily on these kinds of block calendars. You don't have to suffer through a schedule for an entire semester that you're not happy with. You just have to make it through one of these shorter classes, and then you can make changes to your schedule and move on to something that you feel like would be better suited to your interests. So those are some of the examples that I've already mentioned. Another thing about the last bullet point I have not mentioned, and that is professors teach fewer classes simultaneously. This is actually a really important point, so I'm glad that I'm bringing this up now. The professors have more time to focus on students when they're teaching fewer classes. So you as a student will receive more attention from a faculty member. They're going to get to know you better. They're going to be more invested in that class because perhaps it's the only class they're teaching, or maybe it's one of 2 classes they're teaching. And so you'll receive those kinds of benefits as well. And then finally, the last calendar that I wanted to talk about is the block plan, which is what Cornell College uses. This is a visual representation of our calendar, and you can see that we take 4 classes in the fall and 4 in the spring. Another thing that I want you to keep in mind among all these calendars is that sometimes the course credit you'll earn will vary depending on the type of calendar that a college uses. Most semester-based calendars, each class is worth 3 college credit hours. On the block calendar, because our students are spending so much time in their classes, even though it's over a shorter period of days, they actually spend more time each day in class. Our courses are actually worth 4 credit hours, and they transfer to other colleges just like that. So that's something else to keep in mind. With our calendar, after each class concludes at the end of the 3.5 weeks, you actually get a 4-day weekend. So again, that time to recharge and reset before you start the next class. And like the modified block calendars that I shared before, there's a lot of flexibility that these calendars offer. So let me talk a little bit about some of those advantages. Oh, here's one more visual just to help you understand it. On the top, you'll see what a fall semester and a spring semester looks like at Cornell. Each class is taken sequentially, one at a time, whereas at the bottom of this screen, you'll see fall semester at a semester school, which means you're going to take 4 or 5 classes simultaneously, all at the same time. So again, advantages. You get to focus on a single class, dive into that subject deeply. Your professor is only going to be teaching that one class, So they're going to be 100% focused on that class as you're going through it. There's more time spent in the classroom, so there's longer time for activities, labs, various special activities. Right now, field trips and off-campus study are a little bit different now that we're going through this pandemic, but we do hope to eventually return to what we did prior to the pandemic, which was a lot of hands-on opportunities and a lot of opportunities to get off campus, go into the field, take a field trip, go off campus to study. Typically at Cornell, we would have offered 20 to 25 classes that would have studied off campus almost in their entirety, and that could be as much as 3.5 weeks in New Zealand studying geology, 2 weeks in China studying economics, or a couple weeks in the Bahamas studying coral reef ecology. So a lot of ways that we would use the block calendar to our advantage to study off campus. Students can also do internships. At Cornell, they do 1-month internships during the school year, or they do 8-week internships over the summer. When they do the internships, particularly during the academic year, they're not taking another class. They're just doing an internship for credit, and therefore that employer who's hiring the intern knows that that student is going to be 100% focused on their internship. And this is different. When I did my internship on a semester calendar, I was also juggling 3 classes in addition to that. And so juggling both attending my classes, but then also doing the homework for my classes and the internship, and I was a student athlete. It was a lot to manage for that semester. And this is one area that I think that a block calendar has a major advantage. We also get those 4-day block break weekends that I explained earlier, and then that flexible class registration that if you decide to change directions or add a minor to your course of study, you can change the classes very, very easily. If you're in a block 2 class, you can change your block 4 class or even your block 3 class to something different if you're seeing that you want to embark on a different path. Now, the block calendar that Cornell College uses is not quite as widespread as some of the other calendars, but there are a number of schools, well-known schools around the world that do offer the block calendar, and I've listed them here. Cornell College in Iowa, Colorado College in Colorado, and then University of Montana Western is also on the list, as well as 2 international schools, Quest University in Canada and Victoria University in Australia. So the last slide that I have here is really questions. I'm happy to answer questions, and I will look at the chat to look at those. But I'd like to just reiterate one more time, going back to those questions that I posed at the beginning. How do you want your college experience to be the same or different than your high school experience? What kinds of experiences, academic experiences, have you enjoyed the most when you were in high school? And then I'd just like to hear what kinds of questions all of you have. Let me get back to. Okay, so let me just read through and see if there are any questions right now. I don't see any right now, but let me pose a few questions, and if anybody would like these answered or if you want to think about them. When you look at the responses to the 3 questions I posed earlier, which calendar do you feel like fits you the best? Another question that I would ask you is, if you feel skeptical about a non-traditional calendar, why is that? Why do you think you're feeling that? I'll admit that even though I attended a semester-based college and then began working for Cornell College with the block calendar, I had some skepticism about how it would work. Some of the questions for me were, how do you learn math? How do you learn calculus in 3.5 weeks? How do you learn a foreign language in 3.5 weeks? And what I learned is that faculty at Cornell in particular, we've been doing the block plan since 1978. So faculty have had over 40 years to ask these questions and come up with solutions. But there's a lot of ways that they have been able to accommodate the calendar to best suit those subjects. So in the areas of math, for example, you've got to think about it that even though it is only a 3.5 week period, you are spending a significant number of hours in class. And one of the benefits that the math faculty have seen is that students have really learned how to work together. work in groups. And this is a skill that's really useful in the workplace. And so it's become a benefit to our students, that students who decide to major, minor, or just take a class in math, they've learned that skill of teamwork in a subject like math, which can sometimes be very individualistic. And they've gone on to use that skill in future careers. In the way of languages, what we have found is that retention is really good on the block plan. Students learn the material very well, very effectively when they're taking the class for 3.5 weeks. And maybe they go away from the language for a couple of blocks, but when they come back to it, they jump right in, they're able to move forward and progress. And we also provide supplemental language assistance during the course of the entire year. For example, for German, our German professor hosts weekly German table, they call Stammtisch tables in the cafeteria, and students are able to sit down with staff, faculty, and other students who want to practice their German skills. And so there are ways that we can continue to help students perfect those skills that they're learning in the classroom, even when they're not in a language class. Okay, so I've got a question here. Mila, thank you. Mentioned getting credits for classes and internship as another factor we might need to take into account. So I was wondering if you'd explain it a bit more. Sure. So I'll just start at the beginning. So on a semester calendar, as I mentioned before, oftentimes courses are worth 3 credit hours. On a block calendar, like at Cornell, our classes are worth 4 credit hours. And the reason I want to make this distinction is because sometimes the families I work with, students and parents, will say, well, will the block plan take you longer? You know, all these different calendars that I showed you, will the modified block plan at Hastings College make it take you longer to graduate? And the answer is no. All of these colleges are really trying their hardest to make sure that students can complete degrees in 4 years. And so with the example of the course credits, at a semester school, you may take 12 or 15 credit hours. And at Cornell, students typically take 16 credit hours. It's actually a little bit more than students at some other schools. But it's really kind of up to the student in terms of how they decide to space out those credits. Okay, to explain that a little bit better, at Cornell, you have to take, there are 8 courses offered each year, 4 in the fall, 4 in the spring. That would be 32 over the course of 4 years. We require students to take 31 courses. So there is that one block where they have some flexibility. In terms of the internship piece, sometimes students will take an internship for credit. I know that's what I did when I was in college. I think I earned 3 credit hours for my internship. And not only did I have to go to that internship regularly, but I also had to write a paper at the end of the semester to talk about an issue that I was learning about during the entire course of the semester. This is very similar to what students will experience at Cornell as well. For our students in particular, there's a internship program that's 8 weeks long that takes place during the summer, and students can receive credit for it, but they are required to write updated blog posts throughout the 8 weeks, and then also present about their internship when they return to campus in the fall. So there's different ways that that can be done. Sometimes students also choose to do internships that are not for credit, and they may have different reasons for doing that. Perhaps they would rather be paid for the internship, and in that case, it's typically not for credit. Another student, Anastasia, I hope I'm saying your name correctly. How do students make their schedules, and who could they turn to change their classes or transfer credit? Oh, great question. Generally, there's a very strong academic advising system, especially I would say at small liberal arts colleges in the US, but really all colleges and universities, you will most likely have some type of academic advisor to help you navigate this. At Cornell College, which I can speak to the most because that's my institution, every student does have an assigned academic advisor who is a faculty member. So they understand the curriculum very well. They also understand different student paths or different paths that students can take. And so they may be working with a student who isn't sure of what major they want to follow and maybe is debating among a couple different areas. And if that student decides, at the last minute, let's say, maybe they even take the first day of a class, they go in on day one and they say, this is not what I want to change my mind. At Cornell, it's a pretty simple process. The student just needs to go to their academic advisor and says, I would like to change from this class to this other class A to class B. They need approval from the professor who's teaching class B. And with those two signatures in place, they can make that change. It's very easy. Another benefit too that we have found is because it's so easy to make those changes, especially right the first couple days of a class, students who find themselves maybe on a wait list for a class can also easily get off that wait list because there's always a little bit of movement the first couple days of class. I hope I answered that question. In terms of transfer credit, when students are transferring into Cornell, we do a transcript evaluation and we try to transfer in as much credit as we possibly can, credit that a student has earned a good grade for at an accredited institution. And of course, we want it to be something that fits the academic curriculum that we offer. So like a culinary arts class would not transfer to Cornell because we don't offer culinary arts classes. But we've also found that students who do decide, and this happens sometimes as well, that students transfer away from our institution, and we have found that we're an accredited institution as well as all the colleges that I mentioned in the presentation. And so accredited institutions, generally, there are not issues transferring credit away from those institutions. It's understood that we're offering a good product, and same goes for students going on to graduate school or perhaps getting a job after they leave. There's no questioning that there's quality at a place like Cornell College or any of the other institutions that I mentioned. They're all deemed to be good institutions, and students don't have problems or barriers that they face trying to get into grad school or get a job just because they went to a school with a non-traditional calendar. That's just not an issue. And then another student, Yana, asked, do you think that the academic calendar type can influence our ability to be a part of sport club? So if you do participate in varsity athletics in the United States as part of like an NCAA athlete, or even as an extracurricular activity, I think the block calendars can be really excellent for athletics. And I'll give you this example. At semester-based colleges, you might have class times in the evening. You could have class times in the late afternoon, or a lab in a science class that runs late. And that, I know in my own experience, would sometimes impact my practice time. And so I remember one semester where I was always feeling rushed to get out of class so that I could be at practice on time. I think I had 15 minutes to run to my residence hall, change my clothes, and get to practice somehow. And it was always a miracle if I made it on time. But another semester, I would be running directly from practice, and I was a cross-country runner, so I was running literally from practice past the dining hall because I wouldn't get to have dinner. And I'd go straight to my senior seminar, like one of my most important classes, and I would just be dripping sweat getting there. Not exactly the way I wanted to be presenting myself in that class, but it was the only way to make it work. And so that's a challenge with the semester calendar. With Cornell's block calendar, we have kind of strict guidelines for when our classes take place. And one of the rules we have is that all classes are done at 3 o'clock. So coaches love it, and students love it too, because all the athletes can be at practice at 3:30 or 4 or whenever they meet in the late afternoon or evening, and they can all practice together. There's no conflicts there. So that's something that student athletes really like about the block calendar. We're, in particular in our institution, we're located in the Midwest Conference, and all of our peer institutions that we compete most commonly against are not that far away. And so that also helps us as we travel to other institutions. We're not having to pull students out of class at a super high rate, so students aren't missing very much class either, which in the case of the block plan is really critical that you not miss class, because you only have 3.5 weeks of class, or 18 days of class. And so each class is covering a lot of material, and therefore it's really important that you're in class every day, and we're able to accommodate students in that way too. So yeah, these different calendars can definitely have different impacts on co-curricular activities, including athletics. Another student said, when is the deadline for applying? What do you want to see in your future students? So we offer both spring or January enrollment at my institution and a fall enrollment. So if you're thinking about applying to Cornell College, I'd love to talk to you about the application process. We are currently asking students to complete an application, of course, submit a transcript, and then we do need some form of demonstration of English proficiency, and we do have a couple different ways to accommodate for that. I know that testing has been particularly challenging during this pandemic time, and so we do have other ways to assess English proficiency, either through interviews or online testing. And again, I can discuss that with you on an individual basis. Our application does require an essay, and a lot of students ask, what should I write my essay about? And there could be a whole nother presentation all about this topic, but really the simple thing that I would give you as a piece of advice is write about something that you're passionate about, whether it be a topic, a subject, a time in history, a cause, just anything that you have an interest in that you're passionate about, because that will come through in your writing. And the other thing I will say is proofread, and proofread. It is really important to try to send your best work onto a college. And so you just want to make sure that you've eliminated those minor typos or things like sometimes a student will submit an essay that says, and this is why I really want to go to University X. And of course, it's not your university. It sort of makes you feel bad when you're reading the file. So I would just make sure to pay attention to those kinds of details. And then Yovana, I think is how you'd pronounce that, said, can we change different calendars if they're not working for us? This is a great question. So the institutions that I've mentioned, generally their calendar is their calendar. If it's not, if you go to one of those institutions and, like, let's say you start with an institution that does the semester plan and it's not working, you can transfer to another institution. If you are attending a school that's on a block calendar, like a Cornell College, and you don't feel like it's the right fit for you, again, you would have to transfer. We don't offer both types of calendars, so you don't really have the option to switch calendars within a single institution. You would have to leave and attend another institution. I suspect that most of you would be coming to the States potentially with a student visa, typically an F1 student visa. Once you have an F1 visa, transferring from one institution to another is not overly challenging. I mean, obviously there are going to be challenges when you make any kind of transfer, but in terms of the student visa, that's not the hard part. You know, the most important part when obtaining a student visa is getting the very first visa and going through that process. That's the most challenging part. And then Arena asks, is there any financial aid for international students? I can't speak for all of the institutions that I've mentioned today or all of the institutions in the US, but what I can say is at my institution, we do offer merit scholarships that all applicants, whether they're a US citizen or an international student, are eligible for. For this coming academic year, we are awarding academic scholarships that range from $20,000 a year all the way up to $34,000 per year. Our total cost for tuition, room, and board for this academic year is $56,064. And then I do ask students to estimate about an additional $4,000 because you're going to need to buy a plane ticket, you're going to need to buy health insurance, which is mandatory at many institutions. You'll need to buy books, and you'll probably have some incidental personal expenses. So you just want to make sure you're budgeting all that in as you're thinking about cost for colleges. For international students who are on F1 visas, you can be eligible for campus employment, but that's the only type of work that you can do with your student visa and earn money. So with that kind of restriction at Cornell, that means you can earn up to about $2,000 in campus employment during the course of the year doing work on campus in an office at our college. We have recently started to offer some need-based assistance to international students in the form of a grant. We do have students that we ask that students complete some additional paperwork to be eligible for that. We just want to know a little bit more about your financial situation and why you need the additional assistance before we award it. And I don't want to oversell it. It's not that you're going to earn a $34,000 merit scholarship, and then another $20,000 in grant to cover your full cost. Our grants typically are in the range of $2,000 to $5,000. So it's a little bit that can help students, and I'm really glad that we can offer it. But we, as with many small liberal arts colleges in particular, sometimes it's challenging for us to meet the full financial need for our international students. And so we do our best with the merit scholarships and the campus employment and the grant that we can offer. But we can't promise that we're going to meet your full need in every case. So just keep that in mind. But that's also another important question. If finances are a really important part of your college search, make sure you're asking that question on the front end. I hate to see students fall in love with an institution and spend 6 months, really devoting themselves to a single school and then finding out it's not really an affordable option and never really was. So make sure you're asking those financial aid questions right off the front. And I would hope that any school that you're talking to is very forthright and upfront with you about what they can and can't offer you. I think that's only fair. Another question, what would you say is one really important specific thing you have spotted about Cornell University that we can't really realize by researching merely its website? Oh, that's a great question. So first, I just want to clarify, though, Cornell College and Cornell University are two totally separate institutions. Cornell University is a large research institution located in New York. They have both undergraduate and graduate degrees, a much larger institution. Cornell College is a small liberal arts college. We only offer one master's program, and that's a master's in fine arts and creative writing. But we really try to focus mostly on our undergraduate students, and we have about 1,000 students on campus. But in terms of, oh, no problem, Mila. I just wanted to make sure the group understood. But I think one of the things that I have come to really love about Cornell is that Cornell is a place where I've just seen students grow tremendously. It's been fun to work there for 4 years because I feel like students can come to Cornell and they can be themselves. Maybe they haven't felt that way when they were in high school. Maybe they haven't felt that way even living at home or living in their community. They felt like maybe there was something about their identity they couldn't fully express. And at Cornell, I think it's an environment where students are really celebrated and welcomed no matter who they are and no matter what their interests are. So that's something that I really have come to love about Cornell, is the community on campus. And I know that there's probably a lot of colleges that can say that, but I think that there is something special about this institution. And I think it carries over into the academic realm too. There are students that I have worked with in the past that were good students, but they weren't going to be getting into Ivy League schools. They didn't have maybe the grades or the test scores for that, but they have become incredibly successful people because they had mentors at Cornell and faculty who cared about them, even though they didn't have perfect SAT scores or perfect GPAs, but our faculty and our staff can see potential in every student, and we help students reach that potential. And I'm very, very, very proud to have been a part of that kind of development of our students. So thank you guys for all of your awesome questions. Are there others that folks want to add to the chat? I'm happy to answer a few more. Thank you, Ivan. I appreciate that. This is a fun presentation for me to give because, again, I feel like when I first started working at Cornell, I still had some skepticism about the block calendar, even though I was being hired to work there and tell people about all of its great benefits. But it didn't take me very long to see and experience those benefits for myself and to become much more open-minded about all the different possibilities out there. I am proud to be an institution that does offer something a little bit different, that's a little non-traditional, and I think that's important to have in the marketplace, because you are all different individuals, you all have different interests and needs, and you shouldn't have to go to a one-size-fits-all kind of institution. So I hope that this presentation has given you something to think about and will help to guide your college search in the next steps. Okay, we've got another question. How and when this semester would begin for international students? Oh, okay, so right now under pandemic times. So I'm working with a variety of students right now from a variety of countries. I've got students, incoming students that are coming from Brazil and China and Norway and all over. And they're all in different situations. And so, again, I feel like the personal attention has been a huge benefit for these students. I've been able to work individually with students because, for example, the students that I'm working with that are from China have made different decisions. I've had some that have decided to defer their enrollment because they won't be able to travel to the US, and they don't want to do online education. And I can understand that. For some students, it's not the best option. So for one of these students that I'm thinking about right now, she has decided to come in the spring. So that's one option. Cornell has decided to move forward with a hybrid solution. So we are offering online courses, but we're also offering in-person courses. If we find that conditions change and we're not able to offer in-person courses, we will be moving more to online. But one of the issues, particularly with international students, is that when you come on an F1 visa, there are certain requirements that you have to meet. And for new incoming international students with an F1 visa, you're not able to take a fully online course schedule. But one of the benefits of being at a smaller institution is that we recognize that, and that we are going to make sure that we will do whatever needs to be done to make sure that those students are staying in status with their visas if they're not able to travel home. Let's say if the pandemic gets worse. What we really hope will happen, though, is that we're going to start with this hybrid solution with some students still living at home doing online courses, some on campus, but that as conditions improve over the next few months, that more and more students will be able to return to campus. And we hope that this is true as well for our international students who may not be able to come to campus for the start of what we call block 1, but maybe they can come by block 2 or block 3. So again, the block calendar, we see it as a benefit during these very challenging times. It gives us a lot of flexibility. It gives the students flexibility. And again, we hope that will benefit them. But really, it's an individual situation. I have some students that literally cannot enter the country because of travel bans, others who are facing long lines getting visa appointments at the embassies. And then there are a few that are good to go, and they plan to be here next month. So a little bit different for everybody. I know Biljana was talking earlier to me about how many of you will probably be starting with hybrid solutions, depending on your local school district's decisions. But I also want you to know that as we have reviewed application files, we have also been very flexible with students. We realize that you can't necessarily help it if your school goes online, and we will accept those credits like we would in-person class credits. So we have to be flexible just like everyone has to be flexible. And again, I think being at a small institution, we're able to be more personal in the way we approach these challenges. All right, and I see Biljana just noted that the session has been recorded and it will be posted. So, if there's anything that you want to review later, you can. I also encourage you, if you have questions, reach out to these various institutions that I've highlighted, and also reach out to me. I'm happy to answer questions at any time and be a guide in any way that I can be.
Thank you, Marie, for the wonderful session, and thanks to everyone for joining today. I hope you enjoyed the session. I see that you were really happy with the answers, and we are glad that we had so many great questions today. As Marie said, feel free to reach to us, either to us, our Education USA Center, or to Marie directly for any further questions. Good luck to everyone who is applying this fall. I hope it will be an interesting time for everyone, right? But we hope it will go smoothly, and look forward to see the results at the end. Marie, good luck to you as well with the new application season. Hope we'll stay in touch. I would be happy to answer any questions universities have, or specifically Cornell College, and to maybe organize further or new sessions for our students in future.
I'd be happy to.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.